Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the From Foster to Blank podcast. I'm so excited to have my new friend, Victoria, on. She is a powerhouse, and I'm excited to get to learn from her today. So I'm going to have her take it away. Victoria, what do you do?
Well, for work, I do quite a few things. I wear a couple hats. So my background, I started off as an executive assistant in corporate supporting C-suite level executives in Fortune 500 companies. During the pandemic, I pretty much found myself in a position where I'm like, what am I going to do? Because I lost my six-figure income. And I started to lean into the skill set that I have, which is being an executive assistant. And so I launched my company called Executives Extension in July 2020. So we're coming up in almost 4 years of business in this July. And then 6 months later, I actually launched my second business, which is called Virtual Victorias. I very quickly realized that it was too much for just me to handle by myself. I could only support so many people. And there was really a need for that high level executive assistant support. There was like a perfect opportunity to kind of enter into that industry during the pandemic. Because prior to me launching my company, and I guess I should tell a little bit about that, there's really was only support from virtual assistants in Indonesia and the Philippines. And so there's some challenges when it comes to that because of time difference and language barriers and things of that nature. So Executives Extension is really a white glove executive assistant support service. So, and the reason why we call it white glove is because while there's so many amazing features of technology that allows us to provide support to our clients virtually. There are clients that need us to be in person for, let's say, running a meetup for them, or helping them to organize an event. And so we're able to be the boots on the ground when predetermined and necessary. And so as I mentioned, it was just me, and I'm like, this is too much to handle for just me. So I created an online course curriculum, 12 courses that I sell on e-commerce. So it's an ed tech platform that teaches people how to become an executive virtual assistant. And so some people come and take my course and they're just looking to make a lucrative side hustle. And some people are like, I want to just completely switch career paths and I want something that's more flexible and kind of want to be my own boss. And so I love it. I love teaching. I've always had a heart to teach, and that's been really awesome. And then now with AI just kind of taking over, I was like, I don't want to, be last to the finish line with that. And so July of last year, I launched my new tech startup, and it's called Victoria with a Q. And it's an AI powered virtual assistant app. I thought to myself, how can I make myself available to the masses without obviously cloning myself? Well, the closest thing is to basically make myself an AI form. So Victoria with a Q looks exactly like me, a very realistic illustration drawing of me. She's animated, she's got my clone voice, and she will essentially be able to do all the standard things that your executive assistant will do for you, like helping you with your email and managing your calendar. So we're still working on bringing her to the market. But I have an entire advisory board in place, and we're currently in the process of building that.
Oh, I love that so much. So we were talking about this on the phone a while, like a couple weeks back. And one of the things that we talked about is that, like, as former foster youths, as people who have had to hustle just to survive for food, there's this entrepreneurial thing happening with a lot of us. But
Yeah.
losing your job in the middle of a pandemic had it happen too. What was that like emotionally? Because pandemic or not, going through a job loss, how does that hit you? And what were some of the things that you told yourself to help you start the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, great question. To be completely honest with you, I never thought of myself as being an entrepreneur. And you're shaking your head because I know you feel that too. But it's like because of everything we've been through and we've just kind of been thrown into the fire and just
Right,
expected to survive, we know how to do it. And
right.
so, I think because there was so much instability in my life growing up as a foster kid, that my job was one of the things that I like latched onto for security. And
Yes.
so I always pick the safe route of like being in a Fortune 500 company that had like a good standing track record. It's a publicly traded company. And so, looking at the stock prices go up and, actually, I failed to mention this in the beginning, but I actually started off my career in corporate finance. My degree is
Mm,
from Seton Hall University, and I have a degree in business economics. And so I actually started off doing FP&A work. So I was like a junior financial analyst. We
mm,
came in hiring classes, we left in firing classes, and I had to start all over. And I kind of fell into business administration. And
yep.
I didn't even anticipate that, and then realized, wow, I really love this work. Like, I love being an
Mm,
independent contributor. I love being challenged every day. Like, no 2 days
yeah,
are the same. I'm not the same. I'm not a robot. I'm doing the same weekly, monthly, quarterly, daily reports with no
right.
shades of gray. It's very black and white. And so I fell into business administration, like open arms, like, wow, I love this. And so I thought that I was going to retire from Prudential Financial, which is where I was doing
Right.
corporate finance, because it was a great company. I was there for almost 3 years, and I'm like, why would I leave? And then
Right.
when we all got laid off, then I was like, okay, now I have to figure something else out. And then that took over. And then when I lost my job during the pandemic, I actually looked for almost 7 months for a replacement job.
Yep.
And there was just nothing out there. And I refused. I'm like, I'm not going to go and take like a 50,000 or even $30,000 pay cut. I had already done that once before when I relocated from New Jersey to San Diego. And I was like, I'm not doing that again. And I'm
Right.
like, no, I have a skill set. Like, I'm just going to try my hand at this. And never in a million years did I think that entrepreneurship would be so greatly suited for me.
Yes.
It's honestly a blessing in disguise. Like, I have so much to offer the world that I wasn't tapping into that potential. And I even had executives that I supported in the past, coworkers, colleagues, tell me like, Victoria, you have this way about you with connecting with people that like you would crush it in sales. And I was so afraid. I'm like, no, sales is like, that's scary. Like, there's
Yeah.
no like security in it, and you have to hit quotas, and you normally have a really small base salary. And like, I was so
Yes.
I was latching on to comfort, and that essentially is what held me back, because now as an entrepreneur, sky's the limit.
Right.
And go figure, I'm in sales every day. I'm selling myself and my 3 businesses.
So let's hold there for a second because 100% what you said was I went to a job that was supposed to be secure. Accounting, nobody gets laid off from accounting. But then you're in the world and you're like, "Oh, this actually happens quite often." But that is not what schools tell you. That's not what teachers tell you. And I went the education, working in education route. Education is supposed to be like the most secured industry ever.
Yeah,
But when you get into these places and people don't run the business well, you get into a layoff. And I
right.
think that is something that a lot of us are like, wow, that has to be a guarantee. Like you said, it's comfort, it's guaranteed income, but nothing is really guaranteed. So then you shift into this whole thing of like, okay, people say I'm good at sales. Same. I've sold rocks. Like I was thinking about like my real entrepreneurial journey. And when I was like 7, I sold rocks and I was good at it. Like I would trade rocks, sell rocks, make $10 off of a rock. And they were just rocks we found outside. Like they were not special rocks.
Yeah,
That makes me laugh because I'm like, I've always been entrepreneurial.
yeah,
Difficulty was when trauma came in, we went to security because it was the only thing, and I'm going to assume for you as well, it was the only thing that you can guarantee control. So you're
mhm,
not going back to where you were in and grew up in. But
yep,
then you're faced with a layoff
yeah.
and you're like, what am I supposed to do? And a lot of people I think are going to assume when you're like, I've looked for 7 months, this was not I looked once a day and didn't see anything I liked. What was that journey like? Because when you say 7 months of applying and getting denied, what did that look like?
I mean, it's exhausting, right? One thing I will say is, oddly enough, like, I mean, we all do suffer from like, nobody wants to be rejected, right? No, of course, nobody wants to be rejected. But it oddly, like, I accept rejection really well. And maybe that's just because when your own parents have rejected you, like anybody else that comes into the picture, it's like, you think you can hurt me? Like, like, I can get rejected a million times, and it's like, it's no different than what I'm already used to. Like, again, nobody wants that. but I can handle it. Whereas
Yeah.
some of my friends that I've realized, like getting rejected in relationships or rejected in work or with family members, like they crumble, you know, and I'm just like,
Mhm.
it's hard for me to relate to, but I guess it's also because it's been like this pretty much my whole life, you
It's
know?
the why I can't let this let me down. And I know for me, when I do get rejected, I'm like, okay, that sucked. But it's the long-term consistent rejection that hurts me the most because I'm just like, man, but you said something that was key. You said, I have so much to offer, and you created the table that you wanted to sit at. And
Yeah.
that's something that I think, like you said, most people crumble underneath that. They're like, well, I can't, no one's hiring me. And you were just like, there has to be something here. I'm getting rejected possibly for a reason. So when you stepped into entrepreneurial, like really who you are and creating 3 businesses, like, whoa, girl, I do one. I mean, I have branches of businesses, but creating
Yeah.
3 businesses, that's a lot. And it's not you shooting in the dark. You went, this is my skill set. I'm going to create a table here. Here's my other skill set. I'm going to create a table here. This is a need. I see the need. So when you're thinking through, because I'm sure there was probably a lot of ideas, when you're thinking through like what you're going to execute forward, how do you make that determination to say, yes, I need to go this way?
My faith, honestly, like I lean into my faith a lot. I pray about things and I'm a very spiritual person. I wouldn't necessarily consider myself religious. I've had my bouts with religion and at the time I currently don't identify with any religion. I have a heart for God and I'm a very spiritual person, but I feel like when you're spiritual, you're open to like the signs and the wonders of the world. And I'm just like, I feel like I'm always getting messages. I'm getting messages from God. I'm getting messages from angels. Like I actually just in January of this year, as if I'm not busy enough, I launched a podcast. My podcast is called the GLAMB Design, and it's an acronym. It stands for Growing, Learning, Achieving, Motivating, and Believing. And I have a heart to like inspire other underprivileged young women and like bring them closer to God and like basically let them know that you're not defined by your circumstances. Like you can rewrite your own narrative.
Mm,
And so, like, I actually talk about in the first episode of my podcast, like, how I felt a calling on my heart to do this, like way back in, I think it was like 2017. Um,
mm,
and I wasn't obedient. I didn't listen. I didn't surrender. Like I have a hard time doing that because we didn't have control as foster children. Like we didn't have control in our lives for so long that I
right.
think that that's part of the reason that fuels like this being a control freak a little bit in
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like I say like I'm faithful and I'm obedient, but like how faithful and obedient are you really when you ignore a calling that's like really heavy on your heart?
Yeah.
And so I finally leaned into that this year in January, and it's been so liberating. It's been so freeing, and the fruits of it is like it's crazy. Like you
Mm,
know, just to see like God work in mysterious ways, the doors he's opened, you know, as you were talking earlier, you said, I created my own table, you know, like I, I have so much to offer. And it's like something just happened this week that's actually super relevant to what you just said. And
mm.
it's like, that's where I get my chutzpah from and like where I get my drive is like I really hone into my faith now.
And it's like those moments when you're, and I'm sure there's a lot of moments that you're like, is it time to stop this? Is it time to go a different direction, to pivot? I think as an entrepreneurial, we're like, how do we we have to think like an entrepreneur. We can't just be like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like we have to pivot a lot. And
Yeah,
it's so much
constantly.
fun, but it's also stressful. I think I had always been in kind of that same boat where it was like I was trying to have control, I was trying to have the guarantee and kind of work on my dreams on the side. And then I was made to leave something I would not have left to go do this journey. But being in it where I actually pivoted to a different industry because I could not find a single job in education. I had applied over to 300 jobs and I
Wow.
was getting defeated because it was like all of these rejections are coming in. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I was jobless for 4 months and my unemployment was running out. And I'm like, what do I do here? And so I
Yeah,
said, it's time to pivot. And so I started
yeah,
doing things within staffing. And then I was like, okay, what do I do? And I then started a business. And it
yeah,
has been one of the most freeing things. And I sit 4 years in, I've sat back and I went, well, 3 years, this will be the fourth year. I sit back and I sit in it and I go, I would have never experienced the confidence, the drive, the grace to myself, and I would not be happy in a 9 to 5 because I wouldn't be able to make those decisions. And if I needed to pivot, I have to ask for permission. Like, hey,
Right.
this client's being kind of mean to me, and I can't
Yeah.
have that hard conversation without going and saying, hey, client, you can't treat me this way. We need to have a mutual respect. I would have to ask 6 bosses first before I can say, that's enough. You don't get to treat me like that. Uh,
Yeah.
but where I've worked before, it was like, no, 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 they're paying. You just let them treat you how you wish they treat. And I'm like, no, there's respect here. So when
Right.
you're pivoting, and I'm sure you said something happened this week, and I don't want to pry, but it's one of those things that I'm sure before that pivot, before that thing happened this week, you were probably like, how do I pivot? And you pivoted to the right thing because that brought this new thing this week. And now you get to sit, I'm sure, sitting in that going, I'm so glad I am here. Even though it's hard and there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers sometimes, but you get to
Yeah.
say, I know my skill set. I can do this. So how would you define success?
Before we actually get into that
Yeah,
question,
go
do
ahead.
you mind if I actually like expand on that? Because I love to share with
Absolutely.
like the listeners. Because it's not so much like a skill set really where I've had to pivot and with this specific example, it's a new kind of thing, right? It's a morals and compass kind of thing. And
Hmm.
so this is something that like you don't even know about because it literally just
Yeah,
happened like last week.
that's why I'm
But
like, ooh.
yeah. So Virtual Victorias, as I mentioned, is an ed tech platform, right? But then there was another thing that spun off of that over the past 2 years. So and by we, I mean some of my Virtual Victorias and some really talented young videographers who saw the vision, all like volunteered their time to basically document their experience in the field working as a virtual Victoria with their clients. And we created over the course of 2 years a pilot for a reality TV show
Oh
that
God,
shows the virtual Victorias in the field supporting their clients. Yeah, it's really cool. Really,
I
really
love
cool.
that.
So I ended up attending this conference last week called Secret Knock, and it's like a very high profile exclusive conference. Tickets range from like $3,000 to $5,000 to attend, and the keynote speakers that are there are like really well-known successful people.
Yeah,
So they do say for a reason, you are a reflection of the five closest people to you, and you definitely want to sit in rooms where you're not the smartest person. And
100%.
that's exactly what happened here. So I was fortunate enough to meet Larry Namer, who is actually the CEO of E Entertainment. And like when I tell you, like, this is what I mean, like God works in mysterious ways, because like what are the chances? You know? And then because I'm not afraid of rejection, I
Yeah.
went up to him and introduced myself. I shook his hand and I was like, I would love to talk to you. I have this pilot, I believe in like open mouths or closed mouths don't get fed, right?
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
might as well just shoot my shot. The worst that can happen is he says no. So, over the course of 2 days, because the first time I tried to talk to him, we got interrupted because someone came up to him on the red carpet to do an interview. He said, "Oh, find me later tonight at the book signing." Couldn't find him, thought I missed my opportunity. Next day, I see him on the red carpet and I went for it again. And we finished the conversation.
Good.
Well, super humble guy, so approachable, nicest guy ever. Gave me his personal cell phone number, said, "Send me what you have."
Mhm.
And so I sent him the pilot. We had a whole full conversation about Jersey and how he likes to escape there in the summertime for at least a
Love
month. Like
it.
super really awesome guy. So things are in motion right now. Like, it's like he says he's fully committed. He's got 5 shows in US production this year, but he wants to continue the conversation. Who knows what's going to happen from there? But that
Yeah.
being said, I say that to say that I had a really great experience with him,
Yes.
but there were some other people that I had met in that industry that were very shady.
Yeah.
And one of them specifically, if I could be transparent and candid,
Just don't say any names.
I won't say a name,
Go for
but
it.
he very openly admits to people and even told me he was a multi-billionaire. And he was like, my mastermind cost $300,000 a year. And he's like, do you have that? And I was like, no, because I was just chatting with him, trying to expand my network. He goes, well, what else do you have to offer? Yes, I'm sure you could read in between the lines there. Yeah.
If you're listening and you're not seeing this, I'm making a very disgusted face because we know what that means.
We
And
know what that means.
there's a couple points that I want to make, but let's sit there for a second because it is so crucial for foster youth to understand that you do not have to do something like that to get ahead. But a lot of foster youth will get into situations where they are not comfortable with someone. They hear something and they say, well, what do you mean? And they'll say, you know what I mean. And then you feel obligated to be able to get ahead by doing things you don't want to do. That is not what Victoria is saying. She's like, hey, that's a person you go, you're not worth my time and my $300,000. But then you said something earlier that you said, and this is where I don't want someone to hear this, is you said closed mouths don't get fed. You don't need to do something with your body to get fed. And we know the statistics actually are a lot of foster youth are human trafficked. There's a lot of runaways. There's a lot of awkward relationships that we've been in because we're gravitating toward people who are older or more successful. And what Victoria is saying is like, there are times that you just need to speak up. And when you find someone who's genuine and wants to help people, you gravitate toward them. When you hear something weird and shady and you're like, bye, like there's other people out
You
there.
lean into your intuition and you listen
Lean
to that.
into it. And if you don't have it, you need to ask us and we will tell you, that does not sound right. But I like that you said that there are places that some of these places were $3,000 to $5,000. And you might not be at that journey to start with that, but you can get to that kind of a level. But sometimes you do have to pay to get in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the hardest part about anything is that in order to get ahead, sometimes you have to throw down some cash. You have to be able to say, here are my skill sets and be willing, like you said, not even cash sometimes, it's just be willing to be like, I'm going to take the second shot. Like you said, I thought I missed it. And then I saw him and I'm like, this is my chance. And that to me is, most of the time other people, I have felt this in the past and I'm trying to get better at this, is I would look at that and be like, I don't want to bug him. I don't want to harass him. And he is there for a reason. He is being paid to be there for a reason. He's looking for opportunities like this. If you're not going to sit here and follow up after he asked you to follow up, you're never going to get the shot. And
Right.
that to me, I'm like, I see that so much is like, why are you afraid? Are you really afraid to take the shot because you're afraid of the rejection? Or are you afraid of where you're going to go? Are you afraid
Yeah.
of success, which is very real? When you don't know
Yeah.
what that looks like, are you afraid of it? And I
Yeah.
love that you said that because it's true. I have never been fed when I have not done what I needed to do.
Yeah. And, just to finish out that story, because there's actually even more that
I
makes
love
it
it.
even more beautiful is like, when you're tested with those opportunities, right? Where it's like,
Mhm.
here's somebody who's saying, here's a fast track, you can sleep your way to the top. And you say, no, that's not my MO. I don't believe in that. I don't stand for that. And then you stand in your truth and you stand in your morals and your values and you
Mhm.
do the right thing. And then here we go, fast forward to that was Thursday last week. On
Mhm.
Tuesday this week, I was approached by a media company. This media company is called Limitless, and they
Okay.
have their motto, their tagline, what they stand for is it says housing stories. And the way that they described this to me is they said they only want to work with people that they feel like they believe in their mission, their vision, their
Mm.
purpose, they love their story because that's what makes them passionate about the work that they're doing. And
Right.
they want to cultivate meaningful connections with the people that they work with because they're trying to redefine how business is done.
Mhm.
And over the weekend, I spent the entire weekend in the house. It was beautiful. I live here in sunny San Diego, and my social battery felt drained, and I knew it was from the conference, but it was more than that.
Yeah.
And I was trying to really lean into that to understand like why do I feel so drained right now? And it was because I felt like I was in a room of vampires just trying to suck everything from me. And
Mm.
I had this moment of like of self truth of like this is what you want as into myself. Like you
Mhm.
want a book deal, you want to be a keynote speaker, you want to be able to speak to people, like you don't mind having like a known name in Hollywood, right?
Right.
But at what expense? Because you're not a sell your soul kind of girl.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
I was feeling like really like what is the path here? And then here comes this media company that approaches me and says, Victoria, like we love what you stand for. We're seeing your engagement. We're seeing how quickly you're growing. We just wanted to tell you, we want to work with you. We're at your disposal. We just want to
Wow.
document your story.
Mm.
And you have this really keen ability to connect with people. And we have had challenges with that. So in exchange for us, like doing all this for you, we just want you to introduce us to really good people.
Oh,
Because your intuition, like the way you do business, like your moral compass is so intact. Like those are the only kind of people we want to work with. And that was a full circle moment for me.
ugh.
And then
Ugh.
even more so where you said like to make your own table, then they
Yeah.
challenged me in the same sentence and they said, we know you're super excited about making this connection to E,
Yeah.
but at the same time, has E ever done anything like what you're trying to do? I said, no. But I was like, don't worry about it though. I'm the light in the darkness. They said, but you're pioneering the way. So why would you then go to fit yourself into a box that you created? They're like, why don't you create your own network? And I was like, whoa, like that was like a mind blown moment because I'm like, maybe it's time to create another table for me to sit at. Maybe the
100%.
GLAM network is something that should be explored, especially if I'm being told that I need to build my following more. Then if I've already built it, why am I going to then turn it over to you?
Yeah,
So these
100%.
are all things to be considered right now. These are all things that, you know, I've realized. And another thing that I want to also comment on is
Mm.
that ticket, the $3,000 to $5,000 ticket price. I didn't actually pay that. And that's the other thing that I want listeners to hear is that when you are a good person and you connect with people, people bring up your name in a room of opportunities and they invite you to things that you wouldn't typically have had the opportunity. And
Absolutely.
so I was very fortunate enough to, again, why this company reached out to me. Oh, you connect with people, you meet good people, you foster these relationships
Yes.
and connections. And that's attributed to how I even got invited to that room because the
Mm.
gentleman who was sponsoring that event said, hey, Victoria, because I'm a sponsor, I can bring another person.
Oh,
And
man.
I think this would be a great opportunity for you to meet people with the kind of
Yeah.
people that are going to be in the room. And
Yeah.
so once again, like in that sense, closed mouths don't get fed. And then you asked me, and here is I think is a perfect segue into like what defines
Mm.
success. You asked me, well, how do you define success? I
Yeah.
define success as every time that you fail, your ability to recover.
Mm.
Your ability to recover because I've lost it all several times, but
Yeah.
I've come back stronger. I
Heck yeah.
mean, case in point, like started my career in corporate finance, got, you know, laid off. And then I start my career as in business administration, basically start from the ground up. Majority of executive assistants, they don't even have a college education. Like
Mhm.
the ones that are really, really successful do, but I had to start from the bottom as like an administrative assistant, work all my way all the way up to C-suite level, supporting CEOs and presidents of the company. And
Yes.
then lost that job, then basically
Mm.
started my own whole business. And then, you know, all the other businesses that ensued after that. And believe me, this isn't, I'm not going to sit here in front of you and be like, oh, it's been so great. And oh, it's
Right.
just like
Right.
it's smooth sailing. No, it's a roller coaster. I've had months where I'm up, I'm making, you know, 15 grand a month, you know, and then I've had months where I'm down like to 3 grand a month, you know, it goes up and down. And so you have to really be good with your money management. You have to constantly be on the lookout for new business.
Yes.
You're always in business development mode. Like I've worked more now as an entrepreneur than I have when I'm in corporate. But that being said, I'm passionate about it. I'm fueled up. Why? Because I'm working for a legacy that I'm building of my own.
Heck yes. Okay. So you said foster relationships. And I think a lot of people would, and this is something coming from a world that was more ran like a corporate when it came to education. You used relationships, which is not my forte. I hate that. I know corporate world, like you said, it was like, well, what can I get from you? And it was like, you're trying to build your network. And people are literally telling you all of the time, like, what do I get from you? Yes, it's a give, but it should never be abused. And I have
Mhm.
watched so many people like who have tried to connect with me to get my emails or to get my people. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm all for sharing, but there is this thing that we call a boundary. And
Yeah,
it's called fostering relationships. And I
right.
100% believe that, because
Nurture them.
relationships, like they said something to you, Limitless said something to you that they said, but we also want you to introduce us to other people, and you are going to use that intuition. They didn't say, just send them to us and we'll figure out who's the best. They're like, we want you to tell us. We trust your judgment. And
Mhm.
that means that there's a relationship being built. So
Mhm.
when you're fostering a relationship, what are some of the things that you go, ooh, no, like this ends here? What would be
Mhm.
that thing that we could share with other foster youth or people?
Anything that makes me question my morals, my integrity.
Mm,
I mean, what I do as an executive assistant, like integrity and discernment is like at the forefront, right? Like
yes.
we're working with extremely confidential information, like information that could truly end a person, credit card and bank access and, just being privy to information before anyone else in the company knows it, right? and
Right.
and there could be panic and that could ensue, and then stock prices plummet, so
Oh my gosh.
that's just the nature. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
nature of the job. And so I've always just had that. I will really, that's just always who I've been. But then having also translated that character trait into my job,
Mhm.
I think I've just developed it more. And like now I put that into every single thing that I do. And I will say it's something that you have to learn how to cultivate and lean into. And probably wasn't until maybe the past 2, maybe 3 years that I've really started to lean into my intuition. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when you're raised in the foster care system and you constantly are let down and disappointed and you love hard and you have all this, it's like you have to heal the inner wounded child
Yes.
and move past those feelings so that way you can actually hear what's going on inside your head and learn how to trust your gut, because your gut is your intuition. And
Mhm.
I was in disconnection with that because I hadn't worked and healed some of those things. And so it was the wounded child in me that was latching on to something that I knew was not good for me, but I was trying to control the narrative otherwise. My
Wanted
first
to give the
experience,
benefit of the doubt, but your
yeah,
doubt was actually your gut.
right. My
Mm.
first experience in entrepreneurship, actually, and this is the first time that this has even been told on camera. It was my first client ended up being a serial con artist and is actually behind bars right now.
Oh no.
Behind bars, yeah, federal prison for many years, and that's just a testament again because I knew something was off there. And
Mm.
eventually I'm going to tell this story in one of my podcast episodes that's
Yeah.
coming up. I knew something was wrong there. And luckily, this is where I say like God's divine intervention, right? Because
Mhm.
that client was only my client for 1 month. And the way that it ended, she
Mm.
fired me and was questioning my integrity and my moral compass and said that I let out proprietary information. And it was a typical case of gaslighting
Yep.
because I knew that I didn't do that. And I knew that I'm like, but if I wasn't mentally strong,
Yeah.
that could have completely ruined me from the beginning. Like I would have been so discouraged and said, what am I trying to do right now? Starting my own business when my first
Yes.
client fired me and is questioning my integrity. But I
Yeah.
was just like, no, I know that this isn't right. And then to see that karma come full circle 3 years later, and she's behind bars in federal prison for all the things she accused me of doing that I know I didn't do. Wild.
Well, and here's what gets me is I'm so grateful it was a month. because a month is not enough for you to be able to do damage. But if you were with her for 6 months, a
I could
year,
have been going down with her
you
and
and
been
you
an
would have never
accomplice.
done anything wrong. And that's where you had that gut reaction that said, I am trying to attach myself to her, and this rejection, I got fired, and it's like you were released from
Yeah.
it.
That was
And
God's
that,
divine intervention because I wanted to
yes,
stay. I wasn't
yes,
gonna leave her. I wanted to
yes.
make that work so that it was my own self-fulfilling prophecy of yes, I'm,
Worthy,
destined to
good
do
enough.
this and
Yes.
I'm going to be successful at this. And why would I want my first client to leave me? But God was like, no, this is not your client, baby.
Yeah. He's like, there's a reason why. And sometimes you don't get to ever see that. But when you have that gut reaction, I have had moments with not even clients, but just people where it was like something feels wrong. And if this looks like a relationship or a friendship, typically it's that person who's just like, oh, you could tell me whatever you want. And they try to kind of get you away from people. Like they don't want to refer people to you. They don't want you to hang out with anybody else. In a business aspect, the client could be like, well, you're mine. You don't get to work with anybody else. And it's like, that I dictate my business. And I had someone tell me that once as a
Same.
client where it was, well, if you didn't focus on a digital download and you helped me, and I was like, I did do what my service said it was going to do, but
Yep.
this digital download took me 15 minutes.
Yeah.
like I'm allowed as a business owner to do more. So when you start to see that as a business, someone trying to control you,
The
or
red
maybe
flag.
someone's trying to mentor you and they're like, you should do it like this. And you're like, no, I want to do it like this. And the reason why it's like there's a difference between someone trying to like build a relationship with you and just being like, hey, I'm just curious about your business. What have you done? And have you did it like what did it look like this? Because they want to try to do something similar, but they're not sure why you do what you do, and they're asking questions versus trying to control your decisions. And that
Right.
that can only come down to your gut.
Yep.
And that is so hard when we've been abused in the past and relationships have usually been shady, but you have to like protect yourself at all costs as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, is because people, like you said, like some people will come in with that second question and be like, well, what else can you give me? And you're
Yeah.
like, you can absolutely look disgusted and walk away and just be like, I've got nothing for you, because that person is not for you. That person's actually going to hurt you, destroy you, manipulate you, and cause you to crumble. But if you don't get in that situation, you don't have to worry about being crumbled. You can learn to just be like, that's not for me. And you can also, as an entrepreneur, do a trial period with somebody. Like you
Yeah.
can be like, I don't like this. I'm gonna walk away. But I think
Yep.
we do get motivated sometimes by money.
Hmm.
And we go, oh my gosh, what about my bills? But that situation didn't hold you down as it would have if you stayed longer and somehow maybe she pinned it on you. Oh my gosh. Like I think of that
Can
moment.
you imagine?
Oh my gosh. I would have been like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you said success is defined as my ability to get back up. Oh my gosh. Like no one defines success that way. And I love it. And I love that question so much when I ask it, because there's so many people out there that are like money, cars, dream boats, vacations. And I'm like, that's cool if that's where you want to go. But for I think for us, it shifts. And I love that to be like the ability to get back up, because it's not about getting up well. It's not about getting up stronger. You're just like, my success is determined by how I get back up, just getting back up. And I'm like,
Right.
I love that. I love that
Yeah.
so much. Oh
Because,
my God.
even when you think about fitness, right? Like
Yeah.
success isn't about like being perfect. Like I saw a perfect pictorial of this, right? Where it's like, it shows like the glass full every single day, meaning like you hit your goals every single day. But
Mm,
then the name of the game really is consistency. So
yes.
some days that cup's going to look full. Some days it's going to be halfway. Some days it's going to be a quarter. Then it might be full again. And then it might be full for like a whole week. And then it goes back down, but it's the ability to come back because it's the consistency and where you
Yes.
actually see results. But
Oh,
the problem is that someone might be real up and they might be like really, really successful. And imagine they lose it all. And then if you stay down, if you can't get back up and you're literally just on the floor and your mental health takes over and your life starts crumbling, and let's say you get addicted to drugs or alcohol or
yeah.
or even, other addictions that are out there and you just never recover,
Mm,
then what's your life? But failure is a part of life. Failure is character building.
Yes. Yeah.
Being able to recover from that is what I really think defines success. Is the ability to lose it all and be able to get it all right back.
And it's not when those things happen, and what this is what I'm hearing you say is when those things have happened, you didn't say, "Oh my gosh, I'm a failure." You said, "What am I learning from this?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to apply? How can I get back up?" And I keep thinking of there is that show that I can't remember his name. He's like a freaking amazing guy where he just has all this money. But they said, "Hey, we want you to take this like $1,000 and go try to do it again without your connections, without your cards, without your success right now. Go do this again." And he was able to turn it around, but like he shows the emotions back from that. And he's like, "Oh my gosh." And the difference between that, and this is what I hope people hear, is there's a difference between when we go in it the first time and then we re-go through the same thing a second time. The first time we don't have that knowledge, we don't have that learning curve. The second time though, we do. And the second time we go through it, we get to come out even stronger. So when we do go through a loss again, we have 3 times the knowledge than we did the first time. And
Right.
that has shifted my mindset a lot, is that it's the first time I'm going through this, I need to be more gracious. The second
Mm-hmm.
and third time, how do I do it differently to where it doesn't fall just down
Wiser.
because I made a bad choice going toward alcohol, going toward an addiction? Those things are going to crumble you even further down. And that's more that you
Right.
have to say, let me bring this forward to deal with first. You said it in the beginning, the inner child, like I had to heal that first before
Mm-hmm.
I could actually have a good judgment in like trusting my gut, not trusting
Because you
people.
get confidence from
Yeah.
yourself when you heal that. And like, so you brought up a really good point where you said like clients in the past have like tried to pigeonhole you, right? Or said like,
Yeah.
oh, your time or attention's been distracted. So I had a carrot dangling right in front of my face about it was October of 2022. My
Mm,
client, I had a client who was like there was 3 guys in a partnership. They separated.
okay.
The
Okay.
one guy went off by himself. And I actually first started working with him. So we had a great relationship, worked really well together. He
Yeah.
offered me a very healthy 6-figure salary, 5% equity in future deals, like sweetened it all the way. But it came with a caveat. The caveat was that I drop his partners, which I was still in contract with, which would have been terrible for my business. That's bad
Yeah.
business, as well as dissolve my business and basically just be dedicated to him. Now, the job security that would have went with that is
Yeah.
something that would have spoken and saying to my heart if I was still operating in a scarcity mindset.
Yes.
But I knew that I was destined for much greater. I knew I had way more to offer. And I knew that somebody who really wanted to see me win would never ask me to do something like that, especially when I met them with this business already developed.
Yes.
And so I turned that offer down,
Yeah.
and I struggled after that. I struggled to find new clients. I struggled to come back up in my money, but I was so strong in myself and confident in myself because I learned how to trust my intuition. And I knew that if I decided to take that offer, I was going to go down a slippery slope that would have made me lose myself.
Absolutely. And I think so I have dyslexia, and so for others who have dyslexia out there, when she's saying a 6-figure income, some people don't know what that term is, or like in my head,
Yeah.
I have to sit here and do math, but it's
Over a
over a
hundred
hundred
thousand
thousand
dollars.
dollars that
Yeah.
this person said, but if you leave these other people, leave your other clients, come work solely for me, that sounds great. But like you said, like it leads down a very slippery slope, because then now this person has all control of you. And what's to say that in 6 months they're not going to let you go? I've
Mm.
seen it happen where people have done these contracts and they're like, and I know a friend who did $250,000 for a year. And I was like, oh, that is so much money. And they were let go of 6 months in, which means they did not make $250,000. And then they had to back pay because that was how the contract worked. And they had already shut everything down. So then they lost all of their other clients. So then when they tried to restart, everyone's like, why should I trust you? You dropped me. And so then they didn't get $250,000.
Right.
And like you burned bridges, and not intentionally. You looked at the dollar bill, versus like, what is my goal? What is my table that
Right.
I'm wanting to build? But like you said, you're building a legacy. You're not building a company surrounding one client. You're building a legacy, which means you should be able to say yes and no to how many people you need to have. You should be able to say, yeah, I'm going to make 100,000 and I'm going to make 1 million. That's up to you, not up to your client. Your
And I
client.
think that's where it comes down to the scarcity mindset versus the abundance
Yes.
mindset, because that's probably, I like to do a lot of reflection, if you can't tell.
Yeah. Same.
And
It's
coming up
yeah.
on like in July will be 4 years in business. And I'm like, what is
Mm,
the biggest lesson I've learned this year? And
yeah.
honestly, I've been thinking
That's
about this. And the biggest lesson that I learned this year is that to be selective. It's okay to be selective, and when we're first getting started in entrepreneurship, it's like, oh, any opportunity is a good opportunity. I don't have the ability to choose. I don't, I just need to be able to take whatever comes my way.
right.
And what is the opportunity cost that's associated with that mindset? Because you might
Yes.
be able to get that 3 or 6 month contract, but if you're not cultivating a relationship and building that connection with who it is you're working with, that's all it will ever be, is 3 or 6 months. But if you want longevity, if you want abundance, if you're trying to build a legacy that will last and you're trying to scale your business, then it's important to spend the time actually genuinely connecting with the people that you will be working with to see,
Yes.
do we have a more aligned morals and values? Do we do business the same way? How do you view me and this relationship? Is this just a money relationship, or do you actually care about me, and like, are we going to build something substantial here? And so I think that's where I pivoted the most in my entrepreneurial career this
Yes.
year, is like, I'm not taking just any opportunity that comes my way. You have to meet my list of standards in order for
It's
me to
two
take you on.
ways. That's what I'm hearing. Two ways, not one way relationship.
Mhm.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that's something you said it a few times. It's the scarcity mindset. Others might hear this as it's a poverty mindset. It is
Mhm.
a survival mindset. It's I need to get what I need to get and just deal with it versus thinking and thriving in that and saying, like you've said, you've turned people down because they don't match your morals. And that
Mhm.
to me, I am like, I 100% feel that my first year, I was kind of like, take everybody. My second year, I was like, take everybody. And then my third year, I was like, okay, let's get rid of some of the services that I offer that are not helping me. They're stressful. They're not really helping. Like my client's okay with it, but they don't understand the service for what it really is. They want it to be something so much more, and it's really not what that is. And they
Right.
don't want to pay for it. So we're not going to have that as a service. But what I found was when I took those off my plate, I got to do things that I really wanted to do. Speaking,
Mhm.
going and getting my book out there,
Mhm.
going and coaching people for how to be speakers and how to get their name out there,
Mhm.
giving some time away with just my family, being able
Yeah.
to be like, I can go on vacation and not be like, I'm working 24/7. I was able to
Yeah.
step back and say, okay, what do I want to fix in my processes to give myself more time versus
Right.
working all the time? And that was what caught me that there was a service I took away this year too. I was like, I don't really want to do it. I don't get that many clients interested in it, but it's always causing confusion because they want something so much different than what it
Mhm.
actually is. And I'm
Right.
doing it right, but they just
Right.
don't like it. So I took it away. I didn't announce I was taking it away. I just took it away. And I was like,
Right.
wow, I'm sleeping better.
Yeah,
Nobody
you
even
take your
noticed.
power back that way. And really,
Absolutely.
that's how you arrive better for your clients too. You
100%.
don't want to give low quality results. You want to be at the top of your game, and it's okay to be like a master of a few things and not
Yeah.
a jack of all the
All
things.
trades. Well, someone once told me a jack of all trades is actually not somebody good at anything. They're just mediocre at everything. But what it would it look like to be skilled in a particular set, because then
Right.
you're a master in that versus just kind of taking everything. But yeah, I love that to think through. Okay, our last question, and this kind of think goes into it. What advice would you give to anybody if it's from a foster care perspective, an entrepreneurial perspective? Building wealth, emotionally, mentally, network, whatever it is, what advice would you give to someone?
It's kind of two parts. One is on the technical skills set side, and the other is on the soft skills side. So start with the technical skill set.
Love it.
A lot of people come to me and they're like, hey, Like, how do I start an entrepreneurship? Like, how did you get started? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing yet. I don't know what my calling is, what my purpose is. And so I always say, like, before you decide to start an entrepreneurship, think through what are the things that really fire you up and like bring you joy.
I love that.
And like whatever first comes to your mind, lean into that and then figure out what is a little side hustle that you can do that aligns with that feeling. And then
Mm,
from there, you scale it and build it on the side. And then when you're finally able to replace 80% of what it is that you're making in your day job, your standard 9 to 5 or corporate, whatever it is that you do, then go all in on that. Because if you continue to only do it on the side, that's all it'll ever be. Like at some point you do have to take a risk and you have to bet on yourself. I unfortunately didn't have that same
right.
luxury. I was already unemployed and I had to pivot to find a way to survive. But if I had the opportunity to do it all over again, that's what I would do. And to be quite honest with you, and this is what's going to lead into the second thing, which is the soft skills advice, is I wouldn't have done what it is that I'm doing now.
Hmm.
I'm good at it and it's my skill set. And I've been able to scale successful businesses that are now coming up on 4 years in business, but it's not my passion. Being an executive assistant is not my passion. I love to help people. That's my passion. But
Yeah.
when someone asks me, Victoria, what's your purpose? Like what gets you going? What brings you joy?
Yeah.
When someone asks me that same thing, and I talk about this in episode 1 of my podcast, the
Mm.
thing that came to my mind was this situation where a friend in college had asked me to get up and give a speech at a program that she was hosting. She was in school for social work, so
Mhm.
she had invited social workers and she wanted me to tell my story about what my experience was in foster care.
Mm.
Now at the time I hadn't told really anybody. Like
Yeah.
I was told by my foster mother, don't tell people you're a foster kid.
Right.
They're going to judge you. And so I hid that fact all throughout high school. I was in foster care from 16 to 18. So it was like later in life for me, but I
Right.
hid it all throughout high school. I never told really anyone in college. I just so happened to open up to this one girl because she was going to school for social work and we were in the same class. And like, I felt connected to her in that moment. And I'm
Mm.
like, you realize what it is you're asking me to do right now? Like I was panicking. And she kept on, she kept pushing me. She's like, please, people need to hear your story. No one's really going to be there. It's going to be social workers who can make a change. And somehow she was convincing. And
Mm.
I did. I got up and I spoke. And at the end of me speaking, I had a standing ovation and there was people in the crowd with tears in their eyes. And they came up to me and they said, because of your story, I feel compelled to be a better social worker. Or I feel compelled to step into my truth with something. And I think I was too immature and too young and underdeveloped to really understand the volume or impact of that situation, because I took that as a really great experience and I put it in the back of my memory and I stored it for a later day.
Yeah.
And I never tapped into that. I never really leaned into what that was. So here I was years later. I mean, that what had to have been probably 2007 when that happened. And here I was 10 years later, 2017, when someone asked me that question and they said, hey, what really fuels you? And
Yeah.
then I thought of that because I was trying to find my purpose. I was reading this book called A Purpose Driven Life, and I was trying to figure it out. And so I had a coworker come into work one day when I was working at KPMG. She said, Victoria, God came down and he spoke to me and he told me that you
Mm.
have a voice and that people will listen to you. And I'm like, really, Jennifer? God came down and spoke to you and told you to tell me this. And I literally tell this whole story in my first episode because that was in 2017.
Mm.
And that was the calling that I got way back then. And I ignored it because I was afraid of fear of judgment. And people are going to judge me for telling my story. But I knew, I'm like, God hasn't taken me through everything I've been through in my life to sit quiet and silent on
That
it.
part. Yes.
And so I said, I'm like, you know what? I need to show my scars so that other people know that they can heal. And so that
Yes.
the theme of my podcast. That is, I'm healing out loud. I take you through every single episode of my life. Every episode represents a different hat that I've worn in life, different experiences that have shaped who I am. And I'm 35 years old, and I've lived like 35 lives. Like
100%. Yep.
I can connect with so many people. I can relate to so many people because I've lived so many different lives and held so many different hats. And so I'm 6 episodes in. The 7th episode will release next week. And there's 24 episodes total that take you through the entire year of my life. And I've never felt more confident and more liberated than I feel now. And so that was my long-winded answer of telling people the advice that I give you is step into your truth. Step into your truth. Like, own who you are. Don't be afraid of being judged. Like, there is so much power in individuality. And if people just owned who they truly were and stop trying to be so single-minded and just go with the trends and what everybody else is doing, the world would be such a better place. And I'm actually now creating a platform for people to do that. So this media team, Limitless, that came to me said, we want to help you. And so I wasn't planning on bringing guests on my podcast until I was able to monetize my channel, which I'm close to doing, because I figured I'd pump that capital back in so that way I can start to expand and grow. They said, no, you don't need to wait for that. You can start bringing on guests now and we'll produce it for you. So now the GLAMB design will be a place that people can come and tell their truth, the things that they've been holding on to for a very long time. This is a safe space for them to share their story. I did it, and now I pioneered the way for other people to do it, and I want to provide that safe space for them.
Beautiful. And I know, so one of the things that I've kind of heard over the years, which has kind of been a disappointment, is that there's so much power in finding your truth, but I have been on the receiving end of people saying your truth is a lie. So if you're listening and you are hearing that from people where they say your truth, like they'll say it in a way where it's like, well, that's your truth. And they're in that they've been called a liar. What she is not saying is that your truth is a lie. She's saying, tell your story, tell your journey, tell the stuff, and don't be ashamed of it, because we are taught to be ashamed of our story, or to feel guilty for our story. And I know it used to hit me when people would say, you're like, tell your truth, because people are like, I'm so glad you're telling your truth. And I'm like, ugh, I used to like have that knee-jerk reaction where I was like, ooh, you're calling me a liar. And someone else explained it to me, and they said, no, girl, I'm not telling you that your story is a lie. I'm telling you to go tell your story. Your story is it's impactful and powerful, and the only person who can tell it is you. And I was like, oh. And so now I have this different, when people say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, but there is still people out there who do say your truth is a lie.
Well, there's a
Don't listen
reason
to
why
that.
the game, the telephone, right? Like
Yes.
it's a prime example. Like, everybody has different experiences. You both could be living it at the same time, but the way that you interpret that experience and how it impacts your life is different.
Right.
And so since I've started my podcast and I've told some of my truth and my story, there have been people that have reached out and been upset and been like, oh, well, that's not how I recall it, and it's like, they're entitled to their opinion. That's fine if that's the way it registered with them. But that's not the experience that I had, and I think that in some instances, because this has happened on 2 occasions now, in one instance, it strengthened a relationship because it opened the door for healthy communication and conversation to happen that remained to be unsaid. And so that was the whole purpose and goal from this, is for healing, right? And to be able to have the difficult conversations, because so much of what we see in today's society and culture is what we call this cancel culture. And it's like, if you don't agree with what I'm saying,
you're done.
If you don't subscribe to my thought process, then now it's black or white. It's either my way or the highway, which is such an unhealthy way of thinking, in my opinion, because I think that having differencing opinions is what allows us to be stronger, and that for us to connect and look at things differently. It allows for acceptance. But then in another instance where I had the situation, it happened like that, where it was like, okay, well, you either think of it my way or not. And so that's when you have the opportunity to decide, like, is this relationship um, adding value or is it subtracting?
The other thing that I would ask is like, am I going to allow this person to have energy that I could be expanding elsewhere? And I think it's really hard because I've had multiple conversations like both ways where it did open up for healing and be like, well, I just didn't remember that way. And that's okay because we know that our minds sometimes will block things out, but there are
Hmm.
also things that we will only remember when it happens to us. That is a
Right.
big reality. But then there are moments where it's like if an abuser or someone who has been not so nice has been like, well, I don't remember it that way. And it's like, well, here's the text message. Well, no, that wasn't me. And it's like, why would I spend my energy on that? Like,
Yeah.
that's not helping me. It actually hurts me more to keep trying to get this person to get on board with what really happened. I'm just like, you know what? Fine. Like, this is done. Like, there is no value coming from this. This conversation has no value. It does not add back to my life. It's actually sucking the life out of me. It's time to walk away. And
Yeah.
that's where I think that statement has been hurt. It's hurt a lot of people because it has been used as like, if you don't say it my way, you're done for. And it's just like, I'm just not going to give that energy anymore to that. And I love,
People have taken it and run with it and redefined it in a different way.
oh
Like,
yeah, and that happens. But I love the way that you said it is like you are going to go and tell your story, your truth. And you're not telling your story your way in a sense of like you're changing the facts. What
fabricating
you're
it. No.
doing is you're telling it, you're going to get to tell it as much as you want, as detailed as you want, or not as detailed as you want. It is your way of telling it. And that's where I love being able to interview so many people for this podcast that started out of last year because people were like, we don't know where any of the foster youth are. Like, we're out there. There's a lot of us. And I'm so grateful. And I think I have left every single one of these conversations being like, heck yeah, like there are more people out there like me who are trying and killing it. And we just define it differently. And then
Yeah.
we cheer each other on. And that's what I've loved about every single person that's come on is that they've just been like, I'm telling my story my way and I'm thriving in life the way that I need to. Life's hard. Life is just hard. And I'm learning to live my foster to blank. And so I think I just keep thinking like your story is like you're creating tables and creating a legacy that is so different for what matters to you. And that's just so beautiful. But I love that you said, I have to find out what gives me joy.
Yeah.
Because I actually wrote down somebody else's side hustle or their purpose and passion in life could take longer. It's not going to look the same, but we often compare and we go, well, why did that person shoot up? Why did that person go far? Why can't I? Because we're trying to mimic what they're doing in our own life and
Yeah.
it's not our calling. So it's like,
That's a problem.
find
People get
yours.
stuck on other people's lanes. And if they just
Yeah.
focused on their own lane, you'd be just as successful, if not more.
Yeah.
And
And it's
you
going to
would
look different.
define what that success looks like because
Yes.
it's whatever success is. You asked me that question and my response was very different than somebody else's. You
Mm-hmm.
said somebody else would measure it by how many cars they have or houses or materialistic things, whereas I don't really place an importance on that. Do I like nice things?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
but that's not how I define
But
success.
that's yeah. And I love that you've said like it's the ability to get back up. And like for me, I define success being able to have control of what I say yes to. I love being able to spend my days with my husband and my daughter and having that freedom to go and be where we want to be. I love helping people. Success to me is not about the money. The money is nice, it really is, but it's one of those things that it's like it comes and goes. But what stays forever is the memories that we get to create. And I don't have to have someone else raising my kid. I get to be with her. And it was hard because I never got to take a maternity leave because that was kind of one of parts of my story where people didn't believe I was still working and we had her so early that it didn't line up to when we were supposed to have time off. And I have not had to take like I feel the weight sometimes where I'm like, man, I never got a maternity leave. But I'm like, but what I've gotten is so much more because I've been able to be home this whole time and she's 1.5 now. This
Wow.
whole time, I have not left her a single day to go to work. She's come
Yeah.
with me to speaking events. She's come with me on travels. And I'm like, I love this. This is so
That's awesome.
different. But to somebody else, they might be like, that's not success for me. And that's okay because it's
Yeah.
what is success to you.
To
And it's
you.
not that's a wrong answer or a right answer. So that like, but I'm like, every time I hear everybody's definitions, I'm like, yeah, I would say the same thing. Yes. But I love that it's your definition and we get to hear that. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I didn't really hop into my story too much, but my story is a long one. So if anyone is curious to hear my story, please check out my podcast. There's 24 episodes that are coming. There's already 6 that are published. And by the time you guys see this one, there'll almost be a 7th. So I invite you to check me out on YouTube. It's called the GLAMB design, and it's an acronym, GLAMB. Or I think the tag is she.is.Victoria Rose, and that's on all platforms. That's Instagram, TikTok. You guys can find me. I would love to connect with you. Just like Denisha, I got so excited to find like another really successful person who was also has gone through the foster care system. So I'd also invite you to share your story on my platform. And I think there's enough space for us all to win here.
100%. And I think there's enough space for all of us to get to tell our stories and to realize that the sky is the limit. I feel that a lot of us were told very early on that success wasn't for us, that we would never amount to anything. And we're seeing a very different narrative than what we were
Yeah.
told. And I hope and pray that you look at her story, you read and hear all the other From Foster to Blank concepts of people sharing their story, but also go out and find people. And if you can't find them, start creating a table so people will come and be invited to. Because sometimes, like Victoria said, it was hard for her to come forward and say, this is my story. And she did. And it was like, wow, so many people have been impacted by that. So sometimes that creates an opportunity for us to create the table that people are comfortable to come and say, here's my story too. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining. It was
Thank you
such
for
a great
having me.
conversation, and you guys can check her out. I'm going to have all of her links in the bottom of the description. So you guys please listen to her episodes. Her episodes are amazing. And it really helps you reflect if you're a foster youth or not. I think we could really learn from each other. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.